Now I want you to put the word out there that we back up. Understand me? We back up.
Welcome, everyone, to Barely Educated, a podcast by Bears fans, for Bears fans, and finally, back from our own hibernation. We are here to talk. I see what I did there.
Nice.
We're here to talk about the Bears off-season that is off to the races. But before we do that, I think this is one of those episodes where I know the answer to this question, which I think is always the same anyway. Chris, how are you?
Doing good. Yeah, it's good to see you again. It's been a while. But this Bears offseason has been a thing. And I'm looking forward to getting into it and picking your brain and seeing what you think and how excited we should be about the beginning of the Ben Johnson era.
Yeah, so it's been, we haven't recorded since the Ben Johnson news pod. And before we get to the offseason, I did want to say like a word about that. I'm always kind of conflicted as to whether we want to do a weekly playoff episode and a Super Bowl episode, and we certainly can. We didn't do that all the way through the playoffs this year. Listeners, sound off on Twitter, wherever. Email us if you want us to do more of that. I'm perfectly willing to. But I envision us, like I always say in the intro now, as a Bears pod.
Yeah.
And I don't think, unless the Bears are picking first like last year, that we have to do a combine episode. And all these filler episodes. I mean, and I like some of these pods, and I'm glad Hogan Johns do a couple a week, even when it's slower. But like CHGO, it's just like, here's another one. I'm like, what are you guys even going to talk about? Oh, look, Carm has the harmonica out. Stop.
Oh,
next
no.
show. I can't stand it. It's immediate turn off when he puts the harmonica, like that whole thing together at the end of episodes. I'm like, and we're done here. There were like a couple where he did it like super early. Stopped listening. And I'm not trying to throw shade at any one pod in particular, but I don't envision us being that kind of pod. We're not that into this. It's not our full-time jobs. So yes, everyone, it's been a hot minute, and that's just probably how it's going to be in February until the Bears are playing in the Super Bowl.
That's right. Which is coming soon, my
8-hour
friend.
episodes every day.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I'm at with the break. But I would be perfectly happy if there's an interest in it, in doing more with the playoffs.
Right.
Because I do follow the NFL nationally so much.
Yeah. Personally. And we got thoughts, We do have thoughts, but not sure how much to, dig into that, if we should just stay Bears-centric only. But if, an opportunity comes up for a bigger game.
And it's really just, if people want us to do more, I'm willing to take it on. But I also don't sit there and go, oh, yeah, that guy out of James Madison, boy, he's a player. It's like, I don't follow it that much. Nice. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the draft. We'll have this show. I would also think that then we're none of the break, probably, because we're waiting at that point for the pre-draft. And maybe the Bears make a couple other moves, and we're like, ooh, let's do another one. But I would imagine this is a free agency break for the draft. Pre and post draft, like who do you want to pick? What should they do? And then a reaction to, and then we're on the summer break. Because again, in May, I'm just not going to sit there and try to crank out multiple episodes. Plus, I'll be in Egypt for a chunk of May.
Ooh, nice.
That won't be terrible weather at all. 105 where I'm at.
Oh,
thoughts and prayers, please.
I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
So, all right. All that said, the Bears offseason, I actually think, is already pretty remarkable.
I would have to agree, yeah.
But the thing that's funniest to me about it, I don't remember who I first saw say this first, but I was like, that's a phenomenal point. I think it was actually CHGO. So now, shout out to CHGO. I think it might have been Braggs. It's like, they've already fixed the offensive line, and it's been 20 minutes of free agency.
Yeah, look, can I ask you about
crazy.
that? It is. It's crazy. What is it just as simple as Ben Johnson being in charge that was finally addressed after 3 years of polls not really addressing it? Just kind of putting bodies in there. Like, this was aggressive to fill those 3 spots. And the ones that we absolutely needed the most, too. So is that...
Yeah.
I have two theories. One, is it Ben Johnson, or was it Poles really trying to get his coach at the time what he really wanted and felt he needed to make the team better? You know what I mean? Like, I want to give him the
Absolutely.
benefit of the doubt, maybe, but man, the difference in how O line has been addressed is a 180, almost a 360. No, so yeah.
180 works. Look at you busting out the multi-point theories. I love it.
Oh,
Yeah,
sweet.
so my first reaction was not very charitable to the previous coach, but I think it fits what you're saying on that second point. Because there was the one thing you could say, oh, you should cover the combine because the coach and the GM speak. You could, if we go full circle, that's the only thing that really is interesting most years out of the combine to me that we have privy to. Like there's all the deals being made that aren't announced yet. But they basically hinted at this idea that Matt Eberflus couldn't actually articulate what he wanted very well.
Mm.
Because Poles had said something, and now it's been too long, but Poles had said something about how Ben Johnson communicated with such directness exactly what he was looking for, and that he was like excited to go out and get that. And I couldn't hear that and not go, well, yeah, because the last idiot can't string together a sentence. So of course he couldn't articulate it. I'm sorry, that's so uncharitable. Like I
No,
said, that's why I think it matters when they get up there and they can't talk because they have to communicate a ton of things, not just to the players, but to each other. And so, like, Paul says that, I'm like, yeah, because Ben Johnson's like, I need this and this, and I need a center who can do X, Y, and Z. Oh, and the guard, he's got to be, and Paul's like, frantically writing
writing
it
it, yeah.
down, and Matt
Hmm.
Eberflus is like, well, they're gonna have to put their track shoes on. It's like,
it's it's principle.
so yeah, I think how could we not look at it and think that the biggest difference is the coach?
Yeah.
Right? That's no matter what else we talk about the rest of this pod, Ben Johnson is still the biggest addition of the offseason. And then they go out before free agency even starts and get a four-time Super Bowl champion, former All-Pro offensive guard who was playing out of position for the Chiefs the second half of the season and into the playoffs, right? Definitely in the playoffs. I'm not sure what week he started playing tackle for them out of desperation. But Joe Tooney is a stud still. I
Yeah.
mean, I know he's on the wrong side of 30. I think they should extend him for 2 or 3 years. He's still widely considered, if not the best, one of the top couple guards in this league, and basically the best in pass protection. I mean, yeah, I wanted Trey Smith because of the youth and everything,
Sure.
but Joe Tooney's a heck of a consolation prize, and I don't really think anyone really thought he was available. But then once the Chiefs tagged Smith, Bears pounced. I mean, that kind of aggression is noticeable
Yeah.
and notable. Right? It's like they didn't waste time waiting to see what the guard market in free agency looked like. And I love that because we saw a lot of average guards get big money.
Yeah. Some real
And they
big
went out
money.
and got a decidedly way above average to get really a great player over the course of his career on a reasonable deal. Now you're gonna have to give him big money to extend him probably at some point,
Yeah.
which I think they should do. They have the Caleb rookie deal
That's
window.
that's the thing. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Joe Tooney's an excellent player, and he has been for his entire career. He had 4 Super Bowl wins and 6 appearances
That's
at
pretty good.
32 years old.
I'm gonna put that in the pretty good column.
And you know what else I love about it? It's that leadership stuff, the culture stuff, the stuff I
Right.
cringe and question when people like Matt Eberflus talk about it because they can't ever define it. It always felt like, oh, I'm supposed to say something about this. But when Ben Johnson was talking about it, and he's talking about like being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and how he's going to make them work, and he looks right at the players and makes eye contact with them. You're like, there's something more precise here.
Mm.
It's never easy to quantify, but I think it's pretty standard that, the theory that you need players to lead to really have the ideal scenario for the culture. Obviously, the coaches do it first, but you want it to be players.
Yeah.
And Joe Tooney strikes me as the type that will immediately help with that. No more 8 captains, have 4. And we all
Yes,
were like,
please.
8, wow, okay. Everybody scratched their heads at that, right? And then we find out none of them are linemen. That's what I think it was a problem. And Joe Tooney had better be one of your captains. And he should be the captain based on his experience. And I know
Absolutely.
we chided Dan Weeder for learning how to win because he mentions it in an obvious tank season. That was dumb.
Yes.
But the point otherwise would work. Joe
True.
Tooney can come in and be like, I know what it takes. These are the habits we need. This is the way we need to communicate.
Yeah.
And all accounts are that he's really a pretty good leader too. And not just a leader by example.
That's great. And
Did you catch Matt Forte, by the way, on that during the
No,
combine?
I did not.
CHGO keeps coming up. It's funny because I joke about they have too many episodes and I'm citing them left and right. Typical academic, nerdy type. The quote that really stood out, that I just loved this because you're so used to former players giving you cliches, right? And just kind of like not like bad quotes always, but just kind of run of the mill. And they brought up different leadership styles, and one of them had said something about leading by example. And he's like, no. That's just called doing your job. That's not leading. That's not leading in any kind of way that anyone follows.
Mm.
It's a good thing. You have to do that. But he's like, but I'm talking leaders that are vocal. I'm talking leaders that get onto people who need to be held accountable in the locker room, done by themselves, and not just leading by example. I thought it was so good to think of it that way. Like, that's just doing your job. I was like, oh man, that's a good one. And I think that that's one of those things that was wrong with the Bears last year for sure.
Yeah.
And Joe Tooney should help, right? Because Jalen speaks up, but is he really leading exactly?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Makes me wonder too, is that something that he experienced during the Jay Cutler years that Forte was with the Bears? Because he wasn't really, well, other players have said it too. Yeah, he was fine on the field, but he wasn't that kind of a leader as well. Maybe that's something that Forte wishes that, or he knows that you need that because he didn't have that. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's very possible. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's possible. And I think it's pretty easy to look at a couple of these moves now, since yesterday being the other time frame, and say, oh, some of these might be locker room related too. So I think Tooney checks all the boxes.
Yes.
And I think Grady Jarrett was interesting because
Yeah.
that one came out of nowhere to me. And then I'm like, oh, he's not as good a player anymore as Tooney is still. I don't know how much he's got left in the tank. He's only 31, but he had a really nasty injury 2 years ago. So last year was a dip in production, but could be he wasn't fully recovered all the way too.
Mm.
At any rate, but it strikes me that he might be the defensive line's version of that veteran who helps the young players grow and develop, and that same kind of voice. And I've always dismissed that, the significance of that in my time as a Bears fan, because it seemed like we never had leaders.
Yeah.
But then I look at teams like the Eagles and how they could take Jalen Carter. And I know everybody goes, oh, the Bears should have picked him. No, he would have been a disaster here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The year that they would have picked him, there was no one he was going to listen to in that locker. And the Eagles were full of dudes.
Mm-hmm.
So is Grady Jarrett going to be kind of the veteran voice for that unit? And I'm not saying those guys need it as badly as the O-line did, but what if he helps Gervon Dexter reach his full potential? Because something about the way he works, and it's just a little different coming from a player. I think two of these moves are interesting from the veteran leader aspect. They're both going to be 32, I think, when the season starts. Both are very accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben Johnson has talked a lot more about this than I actually thought he would. He's like, I'm a coach. I'm not an offensive guru. Like he's checking that box that everybody was worried about, I think, at least in his comments.
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting too. But more importantly still to me is what you get on the field with these moves. So we've got Joe Tooney for a fourth.
Yep.
How could you not love it?
Yeah, for real.
A future fourth. I mean,
yeah,
you can't do this all the time because
mm-hmm.
you won't have any young depth. Okay, you got to eventually start hitting on some of these mid to late round picks. That's been a big problem with Ryan Poles.
Yes, it is.
I would argue the biggest problem with Ryan Poles is he's completely disastrous from the third round on so far. And ironically, that was where Ryan Pace was pretty good.
Right.
And then he trade those picks all the time, which worked against his own strength. That just killed me. Anyway, Joe Tooney was for a 2026 fourth round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept ourselves from overpaying a lesser guard and still majorly upgraded. Yes. He's in the final year of his contract, but so you will probably need to extend him. The Bears take on $16 million right now. But again, I would extend him. He's good enough I would say he's good enough. He'll age well, I think, based on, he never misses games. Missed 2 games in 9 years.
That's fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. Okay, then they acquired Jonah Jackson from the Rams for a 6th-round pick, and I will admit, this one I was like, why? At first, this was the first move, and this looks a lot better when you see that you're putting him on a line with Joe Tooney and then, as of yesterday, Drew Dahlman.
Mm-hmm.
But a 6th-round pick is not majorly consequential, of course. The issue with this one is he was so banged up and did nothing for the Rams, and the Rams are one of the other really well-coached teams. So there are more red flags here. He's only 28. If you're listening and you're not aware, he was very good for Ben Johnson for a couple years, and he was in Detroit a couple years prior to Ben Johnson as well. One of the funny things is these guys are both best at left guard, so someone's going to have to move.
Okay.
But I want to keep Joe Tooney where he's awesome and have Joe Jackson move to right guard.
Mm-hmm.
I think the right tackle is the better player, so I'll put the left guard by the player that might need a little more help.
True. Good point. Yep.
Although we did remove the whole terrible wink leak thing, which is great too. At any rate, he's also taking snaps at center and right guard, so I think Jackson's probably the one that moves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He didn't play very much for the Rams because of the injuries, and that's why they traded him. It is a shoulder injury, which is a little scary to recover from. Bears take on $17.5 million, but there's a roster bonus for 8.5 of that due like in 2 days, 3 days. As we record this March 11th, it's due the 14th. Okay. But they can convert that into a signing bonus and basically cut his cap hit in half if they want to.
Yep, that'd be a smart move, I think.
He is not the same caliber of player as Tooney. But can you tell me off the top of your head how many people played right guard last year for the Chicago Bears?
At least 3, right?
Yeah, and I'd bring back one of them. I would re-sign Matt Pryor.
As a swing, kind of? Or
yep. Good backup, played decently for what he is, So those are your moves from last week, which is wild.
You're right.
This is why they were done in 20 minutes of free agency with the O-line. It's crazy aggressive. Mm-hmm. You already brought it up. It's got to be Ben Johnson related.
It has, yeah.
Because Poles never did this with the
O-line. That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And maybe this is to his credit, maybe not. But he went out and he got Matt Eberflus, a 3-tech, and then they're like, ooh, medical red flag, and they canceled it.
Yep.
The next year he goes out and he gets the big middle linebacker right away. See what I mean? He's been doing this more so based on who the coach is.
Yeah.
I think, and maybe that's to his credit as a GM, but you better have the right coach. And that's why this is also exciting, is I think this all points to Ben Johnson running the show and or that relationship off to a good start working together, which they both said would be fine.
Man, I'm still experiencing some whiplash with all this. Just with how, like
I keep trying to cover the moves and coming up with other things to talk about as I do it.
Looking back, like pre-Thanksgiving, when all hope seemed lost, and now, just a couple months later, you got the right guy, and not only getting the right head coach, but he wanted to come here. That's amazing.
I know, and I know hope springs eternal, and usually for Bears fan, it springs right into an uppercut to the face. But if you're not excited about this, and I don't know if you should keep being a diehard fan. Like this is the time. 3-peat off-season champs. Take that, Chiefs.
Yeah, that's right.
The real 3-peat.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
No,
the Bears.
They got better.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next move.
Exactly where they needed to be.
These moves, gracious. Drew Dahlman, 3 years, $42 million with 28 guaranteed, which effectively makes it a 2-year deal for 14 apiece. Hopefully he's good enough they want to do all 3 years.
Yeah.
And that was within 20 minutes of free agency starting, and you had your O-line set with the caveat, and this is a big question for the draft, really. Is Braxton Jones going to be healthy to start the season? Because right now it goes Braxton Jones, I think Joe Tooney, Drew Dahlman, I think Jonah Jackson, Darnell Wright.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I could pass out with excitement at the fact that they have a fully functional NFL proven starter at every position.
Right.
And I'd still draft a tackle. I think it would be a tackle. I would try to draft a tackle in the first 2 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in the draft just to have the pipeline ready.
It does make the
So Dahlman had a great pass block win rate,
yeah
95%, top 10 among centers, allowed just 10 pressures, but he's supposedly better in the run game, which actually is great if he's actually better. I won't sit here and say I knew that much about him beyond building into the free agency, right? Like I didn't know Drew Dahlman until I was like watching the Bears in November, and I was like, holy crap, they still need a center,
mm.
and Shelton was okay. He was certainly an upgrade over dancing bear Sam Mustipher, but it was still an obvious need. And so
Yeah.
I started poking around at the free agency, and in the class, and he was easily the best. But it's not like you sit there and grind tape on centers like I don't, right?
No,
But now he's
I've not
between
done that.
Tooney and Jonah Jackson, and this is again a certified starter. You just need Dahlman and Jackson to be healthy because they both did miss a bunch of games last year. He only played 9 games due to an ankle injury.
Okay.
And Johnson runs everything, and Dahlman's a bit light. So like for some of the like zone gap inside runs, he might be a bit light. But if he wanted to sign him, he must not have that much concern about that. And it's kind of like in Ben we trust. Obviously, big money on his center raises a few eyebrows here and there, but they have ignored this position since Cruz
Right.
retired.
Exactly.
I don't honestly know how good he is. I know he's better on paper than anything they've had in the past 10 years.
Right. Exactly.
I'd still consider drafting a center mid-round.
Sure. Yeah. You can't have too many.
Pipeline on both lines.
I think it's
Shout out to former student
I was
Tim.
just gonna say that former student Tim.
Well, I wanted to so you could do the falsetto.
Former student
He's
Tim.
always saying you can never have
Mm-hmm.
too many linemen, both sides of the ball.
He's right.
Shut up, Tim.
Okay, and the next signing, Dio Odeyingbo, sorry. Dio Odeyingbo. It's going to take a minute to get that one down.
Mm.
You've got Amin Ogbonigwe, probably.
Agbangbamiga.
Yes.
Amen.
I love it. I love these guys with the fun names. These guys are going to be hilarious on callers on the radio and me trying to pronounce them from time to time. Odeyingbo is degrees easier, though. Let's just say.
Yes.
This one I'll have down as soon as I hear more people say it.
Mm-hmm.
3 years, 48 million, 32 guaranteed. So again, effectively a 2-year deal with 16 as the average once you do the guarantees. But he is the guy you're playing opposite Montez. He's only going to be 26 when the season starts, so I love that.
Like that, yeah.
This is the upside play. We've had the two older veterans we talked about already in Tooney and Grady Jarrett. And then you have, this is the upside play. Great big guy, 6'5", 280, 35-inch arms.
Yes.
Oh. That's the Dennis Allen Dientz. He likes those the Cam Jordan types.
Right.
So lots of pressures, doesn't always seem to get the sack. And you wonder if you keep doing that, you're going to have one of those random years where you get like 14.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's doing that this year, but you absolutely desperately needed somebody opposite Montez Sweat. And hopefully between the two of them, both of them see an increase in sack totals because they're getting there at the same time.
Right.
That's a unit just like the O-line. I was listening to Robert Mays on the podcast. Love Robert Mays. He might be my favorite football pundit.
Oh,
and he basically is like, the Eagles model, I don't know why more teams don't do it. Constantly draft linemen. And in the O-line, what you want is a pipeline, and otherwise you want unity so that they function together. On the D-line, you want 7 or 8 dudes who you just rotate out, and they just get after it, and they're fresh, and they're just constantly ready to rock. And look at what the Eagles do. That's exactly what they did to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know who that guy is. And then you get Josh Sweat has 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And Milton Williams, most of us learned who Milton Williams was in the Super Bowl.
Right.
He sat for like 100 million, right? It's like, because they've always got guys waiting in the wings. Mm-hmm. Jason Kelce retires. They don't skip a beat.
Yeah.
It's like a top 5 center ever, probably. Keep doing this. And getting a guy this young on the rise that doesn't totally kill your cap, you can talk yourself into the logic here.
Absolutely.
Production needs to increase, but hopefully it does with a solid defense around him. Certainly better than Indy's defense.
Yeah. You've mentioned the contracts like being 2 years probably.
None of
Third.
these
So
are long term right now.
right, but think about how that lines up with Caleb's contract too, because you're going to have young guys
That's what I love
on
about it.
smaller contracts when you got to pay Caleb. So the timing of this really looks great on paper as well.
And we have to get used to. I said this in the group text with the boys, but we have to get used to the cap going up every year and the money always looking crazy because you have to
Yeah.
recalibrate every offseason. No, it's the guards, right? They're getting tons of money.
Mm-hmm.
But if this guy's productive, you could re-sign him in 2 years. Maybe he's earned by that time. Maybe it's like 25 for a starting edge who's not a star,
Yeah.
but it's a almost 10 million raise to him, and maybe he takes it. You know what I mean? So like, who knows? But this is a good upside play in many respects. And then Grady Jarrett, we already talked about the leadership angle, but this is the one that surprised me the most. 3 years, 43.5 million with 28.5 guaranteed. So all of these are basically you could cut him the last year if you needed to, kind of moves.
Yep.
And hopefully a lot of them earn it.
Mm-hmm.
Now he hasn't been the same player since the ACL tear in 2023. He has just 4 sacks the last 2 seasons. So he's out of his prime. But he is a reliable starter, and I think nobody I know was beating the drum more on this than Cousin Nate.
Cousin Nate?
That they had to have more depth in the middle because the defense fell apart after Billings went down. And we love ourselves some Andrew Billings, but it shouldn't have been that bad.
Right, exactly.
Well, there's a lot of factors, right? There's the mental factor, the coaching factor, the PTSD from the fail Mary.
Right, yeah.
But he's right. This gives them more depth. And again, create the Robert Mace Eagles scenario where you just have guys rotating in and out. And he can still threaten the QB. And if he's pushing that pocket, because you mostly put him in pass rush situations and Billings in on the run, and Dexter's maybe more your full-time guy, that could work. He has almost 40 sacks in his career, so he's kind of criminally underrated career, I feel like, because he was kind of mired in obscurity in Atlanta for a long time. But I really like this pairing, and I really like bringing in another veteran to kind of help that side of the ball, which I think needs it a little bit. Offense needs it a lot, but I think the D could use it some, although Jalen does help some there.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what the Bears have been up to the last 2 weeks, and all 5 are big fellas in the trenches. How many times the last couple years have we been pulling our hair out about the fact that they don't improve the lines?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you can give them a free pass for not doing it until now, but I'm glad they did it now.
Yeah, and again, it's got to be the influence of the head coach. It has to be. It has to be.
How do you think Caleb's feeling right now?
Pretty good. I think Caleb's probably feeling. I'd love to see his face talking to his head coach on Hard Knocks this year, if that were possible.
Yeah, for real. He certainly better respect this one.
Man,
I'm just so happy with what Ben Johnson said too. Like everything he's done in the interview circuits, it's like this guy's just a breath of fresh air. You got to see it on the field. I know that.
Yeah,
I'm with Big Cat on being 60% excited and not getting any further because every time we do it burns us. I might be a little more than 60, but I get it.
It is more than 60.
Things are heading in the right direction, and I think that's exciting. I think this is my favorite part about all of this in the big picture. Right, we've been kind of graying there with the contracts and stuff like that. I have been begging the Bears to go into the draft with enough positional versatility and enough depth to not be desperate at number 10. Like, let's say you don't have an edge rusher still. Everybody and their mother is going to think they're picking an edge rusher. That's great if one of the best 2 falls in a typical draft, right, to like 10. But if you're picking like the 4th one because that's just your glaring need,
yes,
it's not great. And they need stars.
Mm-hmm.
There's now depth on this roster. They need stars. The best answer to that is Caleb becoming one.
Mm-hmm.
And then guys like Rome becoming one. But
That'd
at 10, pick a star, not a position you're desperate for. And this free agent binge, and trades, of course, allows them, I think, to have that kind of flexibility. If Ashton Genty is the best player there at 10, fine. They set it up to where running back is now the biggest need when you look at the depth chart. The worst starter is the running back. on the whole roster
Right.
in a
Right.
running back loaded draft. Bravo, everyone. Heck of a start to the offseason. I'm serious.
No,
They
I'm with
beefed up,
you.
and I'm very happy.
Based on the Lions with Ben Johnson taking, what's his name?
Jahmyr Gibbs,
Thank you,
12,
Gibbs.
number 12.
Oh, that was
It's
12.
right
Yeah,
there
so
for Genty at
similar.
10,
Yeah.
right?
I remember at the time, everyone was like, what are they doing? They just signed David Montgomery. What? But man, that turned out to be a great move. So if Ben Johnson
Now
wants
what?
to
He's
do
the
that
second
again,
best running back in the conference.
yeah. So if you want to do that again, fine.
Knock
But
yourself out. But had you needed a guard or a tackle or an edge and picked Genty, I'd be like, wait, what?
yeah,
Then you may have ended up with a lesser player because you were desperate for the position. So I really like the way this sets up the draft. You could also trade down, and I'd be happy.
hmm
They got all things are on the table here. And a month ago we all thought, oh, they got to pick alignment. So that's great. It's also really great on Caleb in a lot of ways because he's obviously got to be happy with the increased protection.
Oh yeah,
But I
absolutely.
like that we're going to be able to get a much better evaluation of him now in years
Mhm.
2 and 3 than, and I don't want to bring him up in some ways because it just always gets so crazy with certain people online. But we couldn't really evaluate Justin Fields the
Yeah,
first 2 years.
that's right.
Third year, I think you could, and that's why I would move on. We got him talent, and he still couldn't do it. But Caleb's going to have a better runway year 2 than Justin ever had,
hmm
and year 3 as well. He'll have a good runway, and so like you get a really good shot at seeing what you have there. I am confident he will prove he's the guy. His year last year as a rookie was up and down, but on balance, there's a lot to love. And if we just clean up the sacks and the deep ball, he can be legitimately great.
hmm
And I think this is a big step to cleaning up the sacks. The deep ball is on him and the coaches to fix the mechanics, I think, the footwork.
hmm
And I'm pretty sure they'll be aggressive about that. Because Ben Johnson talking about building him from the ground up too. Like, because that's how bad his rookie year was from a coaching and development
Right,
standpoint.
right.
But I like this because if he takes 60 sacks and this line's healthy, you're going to go, what is he doing with the ball still?
hmm
Right. And if he takes 20 sacks, you're going to be like, ooh, our offense is pretty good, which is hopefully what
hmm
happens. I'm not saying he's
Yeah,
going to take 60 again. Just
yeah.
there won't be as you'll get it. You'll know. I think we're going to know in the next
hmm
year or two. We'll know before we need to as far as the contract is concerned.
Right.
And if you still had a held together by band-aids and bubble gum offensive line, it would be hard to evaluate.
Yep. And based on what Ben Johnson did with Jared Goff in Detroit, like we thought Jared Goff was just a throw-in, right, with the trade with the Rams for.
That was the
Um,
thinking at the time.
it was, but man, he made Goff a legit
Johnson had
top
other
10
ideas.
QB. Yeah. And he wanted. I mean, he said he wanted to come to Chicago. He can't, and maybe he said this specifically, but I mean, he clearly wants to work with Caleb Williams. Clearly, he wants that.
Yeah.
So,
Obviously, Ben thinks the talent is
right,
excellent, and I still
exactly,
do
yeah.
too. And I think
hmm
Caleb will play a lot better from having some experience and having way better coaches. There's a lot going on that can be encouraging about Caleb.
hmm
But to me, the number one thing is you've built a roster now where if the offense struggles, you're probably looking at the QB struggle more than the O line struggle, barring injuries, obviously.
So, man, though, it's been nonstop good news though for the Bears since they beat
Yep.
Green Bay in Green Bay. You know, that last drive, Caleb gets them into field goal range, and then they win.
All the
Oh,
Bears are 1-0 in 2025 leagues, and the rest of the
yes,
division is
winless,
0 and
right?
1 or whatever, or in the Packers case 0 and 2. Actually, the Vikings are 0 and 2 as well because the Lions
That's
beat them
right.
that last game.
That's right.
Take that. So,
Yeah.
last thing,
Yeah.
I saw this tweet, excellent bit of data on it. It's gonna be hard to just explain, but Mike Clay NFL put together the rankings for each unit for every team in the league. He did it for like prior to Monday and then he did it again today. The Bears only moved up a little bit, but it's funny how many of their positions went from like, it's like color coordinates. Like green is you're really good, deep red is really bad.
Yeah. Sure.
And then he just graded the whole roster that way. Didn't weight a position, so it's just raw data. It's not, and there's obviously problems if you want to nitpick it, but just calling QB the same as HP as wide receiver, as tight end, and just going straight through ranking them. The Bears are actually 12th, and that's with the QB at a 5, based on the grades, because that's the year he had. It was up and down.
Sure.
And of course, we would hope he's like 7 or 8. You know what I mean? Quickly into next year. And so, like, if you look at it, the Ravens are the top team because the QB's a 10, the running back's a 9, the tight end's a 9, the O-line's an 8. You get the point.
Yeah, sure.
Their weak link is the receivers are a 5. It goes Ravens, Lions, Eagles. Of course, the Eagles have lost all their half their D line.
Yeah.
Which they're going to replenish. There's no doubt. They'll hit some home run in the draft, right? So that's where it's at, right? Of course, it's probably prior to the draft. Then the Bills, Chiefs, Bucks, Rams, Vikings, Bengals, Commanders, Packers, Bears. Just under the Packers, and it's almost entirely due to the difference in QB because of, well, Love's got more experience, I guess. And I'm like, that puts the Bears in the top half of the league as a cumulative roster metric. And all the NFC North teams are in the top 12.
That's pretty crazy. Oh boy, they'll have to earn it, but that's what we want. That's what we want. We want them to be the best, and
the Vikings are very busy. I like a lot of what they're doing, but their whole season's coming down to JJ.
Right.
The rest of that roster is pretty darn good, and I think the Lions take a step back.
Yeah, poor Lions. I feel,
but they're still really talented. They're still going to be in the mix. Yeah. I just don't think they're going to be the 1 seed.
Probably not.
All right, take us out of here.
Thanks, everyone, for listening after this little hiatus, but we're back and we'll be checking in a little more regularly as we get closer to the draft and everything. Find us on the socials at bearly_educated. Email us, bearlyeducatedpod@gmail.com. Love to hear your thoughts.
Caleb Williams.
The Bears.
It's my quarterback.
My Chicago Bears.
I love the Bears.